half an hour at the very, very most. Just to introduce myself, I'm Miss Chick. I'm the early years lead here at the Communications Academy. We've got Miss Zebedee here as well, she's the reception class teacher. And this morning, we just want to give you a little insight into how we approach maths such early on in our curriculum. So many of the children that come to us, that are your children, are aged 3, 4 and 5. So for parents, it's often, well, how are we teaching maths to that age group? So really this morning, it's just to give you a little understanding of how we start maths so early on. One of the first areas we look at with the children, especially in nursery, is looking at patterns and repeating patterns. By children getting a concept of patterns very early on, it supports them later on, can you see it okay? When they start looking at addition and subtraction and multiplication. Because maths in general is looking for patterns, it's for looking for repetition, it's for looking for different ways of making patterns. So a little activity that we might do in the morning with the children is to repeat the pattern. So we could start with a happy face, and then we'd have a sad face. And we'd say, how can we repeat this pattern? Or we go a happy face, and then a sad face. And the children would continue with that. So they automatically are starting to see that the image gets repeated. If we can see that they do that really easily, we can make it a little bit more tricky for them. So we could make it 2 happy faces and a sad face. Now repeat that. So we're challenging them, we're pushing them on that little bit further, but they're still working through patterns, but we're making it a little bit more tricky. We'll have happy, happy, and then sad. Okay. Like I said, the reason we introduce patterns early on, it's a fun way of them learning, it's interactive, but it also allows them in their minds to separate images, because later on when they come to addition or subtraction or multiplication, they have to be able to separate those numbers and symbols. So it's a skill that they're learning really quite early on. Many children come to the nursery and reception class and the mums and dads say, oh, they're great, they can count to 10. Oh yeah, no, they're really good at counting, they can count to 20. And we appreciate that, we think that's fantastic. Some children as young as 1 and 2 can already count to 5, let's say. But learning to count is like learning to sing a song. It's like learning to say their name. It's like learning a nursery rhyme. The children have to understand the concept of those numbers. So, what is a number? Is a perfect question. Counting in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We call it rote counting, okay? And this teaches children that numbers come in a specific order. So we start at 0, and the next one is 1, and the next one is 2, and we count up like this. And children have the ability to keep counting, keep counting, keep counting. But the children have to understand that, for example here, the number 5 means there's a quantity, there are 5 things. So it is a name, but it means the number 5 means there are 5 fingers on your hand. It means there are 5 children in a group. It means there are 5 dots on the dice. When it comes to their birthday, many of them will be turning 4 or 5, it means they've had 5 birthdays. It means they are 5. So many of them think counting's great, but it's us that have to teach them. That's brilliant, but it's because we have 5 of those things. Okay.
Okay, so leading on from that, we teach children to match the numeral to the quantity, because if you look at a numeral, to a child, that could be a letter, it could be a squiggle, it could be anything. So we teach them to recognise that this is the number 3, but also, as Miss Chick was saying, it means that there are 3 things in a set. If you look on your tables, you've all got number fans with you. These are the ones we use in nursery for younger children. And it has the number on the front, and then on the back, it has the corresponding number of teddy bears. So they can learn to associate the number 4 with 4 bears, and so on. We do it throughout the school. When the children get to Key Stage 2, when we start teaching hundreds, tens, units, things like that, we have other things that are more appropriate for the older children. But in reception, we use our fans, we use our Numerals, which, as you can see here, are really useful. How many holes can you see? There's 9. Is there 9? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. And the children can count. They put their fingers in, their hands in, and they learn to realise that that is worth 9. And when we start to teach addition, we don't go for the numbers straight away, because if you were to say 3 add 4, that doesn't really mean anything to them. They can't hold the values in their heads. So we'll have the physical representation.
That is. So we get number 3
and number 4.
That way around. Number 3, so they'll get their 3 counters, 3 balls, and they can put them in the 3 spaces so they know they've got that spot on. We'll introduce the symbol for addition, and then they do the same with this one. They put the pictures, or they put the balls or the counters in the 4 spaces. And then the whole thing then would be, we'll count all of them together.
And that the visual representation helps them to realise what a number is, because whilst they know that 3 is 3, sometimes when they're learning addition and subtraction, it's a lot for them to hold in their heads. Yeah. And this is just a really easy way of cementing the basics of what a number is.
Yeah.
And as I said, throughout the school they do this when they learn thousands, hundreds, and the tens and the units and things like that. We have the base 10, the sticks and things, and you probably remember them.
All your children will be familiar with these resources, because these are what we bring into their maths lessons every day. Nursery children and reception children, they all have maths 5 days a week, and it's not sitting down with textbooks, it's interactive, it's fun, it's using these big resources, it's using blocks for counting, and it's interpreting numbers into quantity in a way that's physical and fun for them to understand.
Yes.
Sorry, the paper and pencils is for you all if you want it to write down. We're not testing you later on, don't worry. If you want to make any notes. Estimating is a really important skill for children, because in their little minds, they're looking at a whole amount of something. And it's encouraging them to think about a number, to think about the amount that they can see. And early on they come out with the most beautiful words like trillions and billions when they see such a big number. And what we do early on is we show them pictures. So when we were looking at winter, we started to estimate, and we looked at the different amounts. So we looked at this picture of the penguins, and we'd ask, how many can you see? How many penguins do you think are there? And the children in their minds, they're already understanding, well, I know there's not 1, and I know there's not 4 or 5. So especially in the nursery, we'd then get numbers like 10 or 15 or 20. In reception class, because their vocabulary is getting better, you get numbers like 100, 1,000, billions. So by children estimating, they're guessing, but that's a really important skill. As the number shrinks and gets a little bit smaller, they then start to think, well, it's a smaller number now, so it must be around 5 or 6. When you get even smaller, they don't need to estimate anymore, because they can see and count in their little minds that, well, I can see 3, so I know that's the right answer, and they will give you an answer that is closer to the amount that they can see. So estimating, really, it's a skill that's allowing them to look at a large group of whatever it is and put in a reasonable number to it. And it's us as teachers that then start to think they're getting a grasp, they're starting to understand the concept of the amount of something and how it's getting bigger.
Okay, so another part of the foundations that we teach in mathematics is careful counting. As Ms. Chick said earlier, children often can count to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But again, when it comes to applying that to counting carefully, they really struggle often. So for instance, this block of cubes, if you ask a child to count it, they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And they won't count it properly. They'll recite the numbers that they know, but they're not actually counting carefully, as we call it. We really encourage the children to touch count. So you would ensure you can use a magic wand, a pencil, their finger, anything. But you encourage them to touch the individual blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And if something is a bit of a mix-up, a bit of a jumble like that, that can be really tricky for children to count. They can't necessarily see what they've already counted. They'll recount the same thing. So we teach them in reception and nursery to line things up, move them. So we have a simple rule: touch it, move it, count it. You touch it, you move it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many? Should we check again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 things. It's dead simple. And I think we take it for granted that children do this, but so often they'll be really confident with their numbers. They'll say, I can count to 20. And then they'll come to the board and they'll say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's 10. And they don't really take the time to check and count. And that's another thing that we always encourage is the checking. Count it once, are you sure? Check again. Even if they've done it right the first time, it doesn't hurt to check. It's just really embedding that understanding, yeah.
Also, in the nursery, it's an ongoing daily activity that we do, and it could be with anything that we see. So if we're out and about with conkers, with acorns, with the bicycles, how many friends have we got? Okay, we've got 5 friends. How many bicycles do we need now while we're in the playground? We'll need 5. Let's check Miss Chick's got enough out for us. 1, 2. So we're actually physically touching the objects and knowing that we have that amount there.
We do use the numicons, things like that, as we said before, which are specifically designed for maths. But then also we use a lot of things from home. Kids love socks, and there's so much you can do with socks. These are clean, don't worry. You can count socks, you can pair them up, you can find matching pairs, patterns, anything. We do measuring with socks. Conkers, pine cones, leaves. Children love like natural hands-on materials. And another thing, some of the reception parents might have heard of these. We use, I don't think we use them in nursery so much later on, but we use the 10 frames. So obviously this is a 10 frame, there's 10 boxes, 5 on top, 5 underneath. And we show children the value of a number on a 10 frame, but also it encourages the careful counting. We use this throughout the different objectives in the curriculum. So for 1 more, they can add 1 more on. For 1 less, they can take 1 away. I'll show you how to use it later on because we'll come back to that.
But that's really important. If they are doing counting at home with you, if you are wanting to do an activity with them, so you could say, I need 4 carrots to help with tea tonight, or we need 10 potatoes. Make sure when they're getting them, they're putting them down. 1, 2, 3, and they're counting as they're putting them out.
So in our curriculum, we do teach the children addition and subtraction, and obviously that's quite hard to understand. So the first thing we sort of address is 1 more and 1 less. That's the very beginnings of adding and taking away. We don't confuse it with big numbers. We don't write it down as a number sentence straight away. We just make it really physical, really fun, but just very simple for them. So for instance, 1 more is pretty obvious. Just add 1 more. How many do you have now? How many did we have to start? And now we have that. And 1 less, you take them away. Oh, is it there more or are there less? There's less. How many do we have? simple things like using the language more than anything else.
It's all about the vocabulary and them understanding by giving one more. It means we're introducing them to addition by taking one away, eating one, putting one in your pocket, giving one to somebody else. You are now taking away. So it's the very early stages of addition and subtraction, but they're doing it in a way, we put Smarties here, because it's a perfect representation of something they enjoy, and now saying, give one away, how many have you got now? Or, can I have one? And you're getting one more. Okay.
Oh, now Numberland. This is something we do in reception. Do you introduce it in nursery?
No, we'll leave it for you guys.
So it's a really fun way of teaching maths. It's all about our landing numbers, as you can imagine. The numbers go from 1 to 10. They have their own houses, their own gardens, and this is a really good way of tying every element of mathematics together in a really child-friendly way. So as you can see from this picture, this is number 5, and he lives in the number 5 house, and he has a number 5 flag. He has 5 windows on his house. He has 5 pegs on his lawn, 5 fingers on his glove, 5 conkers, and 5 blocks for his tower. And his garden, which you can't really see here, but that is a pentagon, because that's a 5-sided shape. So the number 1, who you can't see, he would have a circle as his garden, because there are no sides. Well, there's one side on a circle. And we teach this every Monday. We introduce it. We introduce a problem, and we use it in every area of the curriculum. One more, one less, capacity, things like that. And they really enjoy it. And it's a way of teaching maths and using stories, because children love stories. And stories shouldn't just be used in literacy lessons, it should be for maths as well. And it really grabs their imaginations. They think, oh no, Hodgy Podgy's caused a problem. He's the baddie that lives in Numberland. And the children then have to fix it and put the problem right, but use their mathematical skills to do that. So they really enjoy that.
So an investigation that the children might find on a Monday morning would be, they're looking at house number 5, but they've seen that Hodgy Podgy, who is the little elf, over the weekend, he's put an extra flower in the garden. So house number 5 now has 6 flowers. Oh, what's happened there? And the children then have to investigate. They have to think about, well, there's one more. Number 6 is one more than number 5. And then they have to then go to the other houses and see what he may have done there as well. The children love it. They absolutely love it. There's little songs to the different activities. They have their own little Numberland in the classroom. And it's looking at that whole concept of quantity and amount, and understanding that this house should only have this amount. Okay, I love it. Shape, space and measure. This is part of our curriculum, and it's not a big part of the curriculum, but it's certainly an introduction that supports the children later on. It's mainly all about vocabulary and children using the right language to explain themselves. So often we find children that come to us with English as an additional language that aren't quite clear with spoken English, aren't always as confident with their shape, space and measure as they would be with numbers, because numbers are universal, they're everywhere. Wherever you are in the world, the number 1 is number 1, number 2 is number 2. But with shape, space and measure, it's really about the vocabulary. So many children that do come to us, they know it in their own language, but we're introducing it in the English language also. So really, it's when you're at home, is the bath full? Come out of the bath, we now have to empty it. So as part of parents, as teachers, using the correct language for the children to understand the measurement of things. So full, empty, how's your cup looking? Half. Just fill it to half. Give children the opportunity to fill, to pour at home, just as they do at school. Shapes is another lovely one. All around us there are shapes. We don't We introduce the correct names for shapes in the early years, but what we really want the children to do is to look around them in the environment and see what shapes can they see. So it might be looking at the clock in the dinner hall, or they may look at the door as they're going through it, and just building the confidence in using the correct vocabulary and really being aware of what shapes are around us.
Yeah, so length is a really nice one. Usually in school we try and give the children a blob of Play-Doh each and they can experiment. Can you make a really long snake? Now can you make a shorter one? Can you make a long necklace using the threading beads that we have? And just using that vocabulary, and as Chick said, long, short, medium, things like that, and applying it in every day, even in the dinner hall. That's a long sausage or what have you, and then that links to height, and we usually teach this through Jack and the Beanstalk. How tall is the beanstalk? Well, that's a very tall, that's a very short one, and things like that, just really using that vocab with them, and it'll come very naturally.
So many stories you'll read at night time before they go to bed. There's often a lot of vocabulary there for shape, space and measure in there. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks was very hungry because her tummy was empty. She ate the porridge and her tummy then got really full. Okay, so it's thinking around, you're not actually doing maths, but you are, because we're introducing them to the correct language. Okay, top tips for at home, okay? The children get maths, like I said, every day with us. Fun, interactive, through stories, through play, through games. But you can also do that at home, and it's really, really easy. Many times parents think, oh, maths, I don't know how to approach it, I don't know how to help the children with it. Many times you're overthinking what they actually need, and hopefully this session has made you understand how simple maths is in the early years, and it's really embedding those concepts early on for the children. So just having dice at home, whether you're playing board games, whether you're just wanting them to count the dots on the dice, 1 dot for the younger children, and then introduce 2 for addition. Okay, how much is on this one? How much is on this one? Just add them all together. As you're out and about, look for shapes in the environment. Oh, look at these cones. Okay, the triangle. What's the shape of the clock in the restaurant, or as you're out and about? And then having tea at home. You might have pizza one night. You see that there's 4 of us around the table. We need to make sure we all get a piece. And we cut the pizza into 4 to make sure we're sharing it out nicely. So maths is everywhere, and it's part of your everyday life, and it's allowing children to understand that, because as they get older, if these are embedded, these concepts are really secure, they will then be able to look at division and sharing, because they've done it early on, and they'll remember the physical practice of it. Do you want to say anything else?
Just to remember, maths doesn't have to be done at a table with pencil. It's physical, it's fun. Take it outside. Children love being outside. Throw the beanbag. How far can you get it? How many steps does it take to get it back? What's the time, Mr. Wolf? They love that game. We play it every day. Just things like that. It really can be a really lovely and fun activity for the children. So don't feel that they have to be sat down at a table to learn, because they learn the best, in my experience, when they're interested, when they're engaged, and when they're using their energy, because they have so much energy. So why not use up the energy and get them to learn at the same time? Okay.
There's a little video here that we were going to show you, but I think time's ticking on a bit, so I'll just explain what the teacher's doing. The children have read a story all about different animals, and the animals all do a different movement. So the camel bends his knees, the buffalo raises his shoulders, what else is it? The seal claps his hands, So they had the story at the start of the session, children thinking they're having a literacy story, good part of story time, but then she brings a dice along. The children all stand up, they get into a lovely big circle, and the teacher throws the dice, and she opens the page, and they see the seal in his hand. They count how many dots are on the dice, so there's 4 dots, so we all need to do 4 claps, like a seal. So she's changing the story that they've all been listening to into a maths activity, simply by taking the different motions, taking a dice, and making it more interactive for the children. So instead of that's what's okay. Please feel free to come and have a little look at the resources. We've given you lots on the table as it is. If you want to ask us any questions, please feel free. Yeah?
I'm mother of Asma. She always likes to learn and speaks well when I ask something, but doesn't like to write.
Yeah.
That's, at this age, I wouldn't say that's a problem.
Yeah.
I really think with certain children, if you push them too soon, they'll really resent doing it, and that's what you want. You need to captivate their imaginations, make them want to do it, and they'll do their best, and they'll really try, and then they'll really kind of learn to love learning, and they'll want to do it. And I think it's one of those things at this age, it's a very gradual, step by step, every day there's new challenges, new things to learn, and we just try not to overwhelm them.
Yeah.
And we really go with the individual needs of the children. If one child is ready, we won't hold them back, we'll really push them and challenge them. But if another child's not ready, that's okay, because they'll get there.
What we do, we don't get the children don't get their mark, or we don't say they can do it by showing us on paper. We take photographs, we observe, and that's our way of collecting that assessment and seeing that the children can do it. It's not until they go into Key Stage 1 and higher up in the school that they have to show their working on paper. For us, as long as they put the correct amount of balls in the circles, or they have repeated the pattern, for us, we'll take a photograph, and it will go on the observations that we make of them. Okay, so don't worry if they're coming home and you want to give them maths to do. They might not be quite ready yet. They might be giving them in a more physical way. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah. As we always say, the early years door.